Welcome to the Autism in Black podcast, where we focus on all things autism and the Black parent experience. Our goal is to always educate, support, and empower parents to advocate for not only their children, but themselves. Hello, and welcome to the Autism in Black podcast. I'm Maria Davis-Pierre, a licensed mental health counselor in the state of Florida and America's #1 autism advocate for Black parents. I am the founder and CEO of Autism in Black, Inc., where we aim to include the excluded. Today we have Naomi Studevan, who is the founder and executive director of Advocacy Unlimited, LLC. Naomi received her bachelor's in psychology from Clark Atlantic University, an MBA from the University of Phoenix, and has acquired over 17 years of experience and training in education and behavioral health. Utilizing her extensive knowledge of state and federal education laws related to children with special needs, Naomi has worked tirelessly to inform parents of their rights and empower them to fight for the rights of their children. It is Naomi's personal and professional passion to empower parents and to see that every child receives a free, appropriate public education. Naomi and the staff of Advocacy Unlimited have worked closely with both education and behavioral health service providers to ensure their programs and services are following best practice and standards. It is my great pleasure to have Naomi on the show today to talk about parent advocacy, and I hope you enjoyed today's show. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Autism in Black podcast. I am very excited about today's podcast guest, as she is an advocate like myself, so this is sure to be a great conversation. Today we have Naomi Studevan, who is going to talk to us and drop some major gems on advocacy. Hi, Naomi. How are you doing today?
Hi, Maria. I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm so excited.
I'm excited too. Now, I have read your bio, your amazing bio, but can you tell us more about who you are and what you do?
Yes. So a lot of times whenever I speak, I always start off with my story of how, I came to the point of advocacy, right? So I start off with the fact that I'll say I've been an advocate for now it's been about 15 years, and I've been a professional advocate for about 5 years. And I say, the 15 years because that's how old my son is. He was, one of the first people other than myself that I've ever advocated for. And there was a situation where, in the hospital, and they kept sending us back home, and I had to put my foot down, and for once, it really worked. I spoke up, and I saw that, yes, when you speak up and you don't allow people to push you around, you can actually see results. So that's kind of when I had like a light bulb of, this is something that I can do. And fast forward another 10 years, right? 10 years is when I found out about advocacy work. I attended a training where there was a group that also did advocacy work, and just listening to what they did and how they did it, I said, okay, so this is what I'm supposed to do. Are you guys hiring? Like right then and there, I just knew like, this is my calling. And so that's pretty much how I got into it. But I've always been in mental health. I have 15 years of experience in mental and behavioral health. I have over the years learned to kind of mesh the two and figure out how I best can support families. And so since I started my own business, that's what I've done. I feel like it has given me the ability to provide advocacy services on a holistic basis. I can touch every piece of it. And even if it's something that I do not provide, I make sure that I do a hand-to-hand handoff, a passing of the baton, that if it's a service that I don't provide, I don't just tell a family, hey, I don't do that. I say, you know what? Let me do some research for you. Let me find out, and I will make a handoff referral so that I know that the children that I service are getting exactly what they need.
I love that. And you mentioned holistic advocacy. Can you explain a little bit more what that is?
Yes. So the way I see it is when I worked for the one company that I mentioned, where I first kind of picked up my advocacy skills as a professional, we did a lot with mental health because it was a mental health organization. Now, on paper, we also dealt with the juvenile justice system and then the education side. So we dealt with a lot more of the education and the mental health, not so much the juvenile justice. But even with that, there was a lot of, well, you can't do this, you have to do it this way, you can't do that. I started seeing like so many things were slipping through the cracks, just like I saw when I was doing mental health case management. So many situations slipped through the cracks because of the bureaucracy behind a lot of the larger organizations. And so when I look at the holistic approach to it, I look at it as being able to help them in all capacities. When we're talking about children, we know that all kids have to go to school. Within that school environment, they deal with mental health, behavioral health, social interaction. There's all these different pieces. Then there's also, right, the home environment. What's going on with the parents? Are the parents capable? Does the family have food? You know, like I said, if there's other services that are going to support this family, I'm willing to find them and refer them to those services, because what I've learned over the years is that no matter how hard I work with any particular child, if I don't help the entire family, so to speak, if we're not looking at everything from every aspect, you're only going to get but so far with that child. You have to look at it from every angle.
Yes, that is a great explanation. And when we're speaking about advocacy, I know, like me, you also work with the parents themselves on, helping them be advocates. So can you explain how you help parents become not only advocates for their children, but for themselves as well?
Yes, absolutely. So probably when I first started my company, I made a t-shirt and everything because it just came to my mind: educate, encourage, empower. One of the things that I would often see is that when parents finally came to me, or even when I worked for the other organization, they would come and they were angry, they were frustrated, parents were in tears. I just don't understand. I feel like a horrible parent because my child they've been suffering, they haven't gotten everything that they've needed. And I've always hated that a parent, I would tell them, the fact that you are here asking for help says that you're doing the very best that you know how to do, that you're doing the research and you're trying to find as much support as you can. And so what I try to do is actually, as I'm doing things for them, I'm educating them on what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times, even before an IEP meeting, I'll have a call with the parent and we'll go over the notes, everything that I've discovered, and I'll explain it to them. I'll tell them the page to look on, and I'll go over it. And then I explain to a lot of my parents, depending on kind of where I see them advocacy wise, is some parents, I'll say to them, listen, this is your meeting. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to back you up in every aspect of this meeting. However, I want you to know that you run this. Yes. Not the teacher, not the principal, not the counselor, but you. So if they misstep, if they misspeak, if you get flustered, I am there and I will step in. But I try to make it so that I use the term that we use in mental health. I try to work myself out of a job. Yeah. If I'm teaching you as I go along, I'm also working to empower you so that you feel comfortable enough to go out and speak on your own as well.
Yes, that is very common. As a therapist, that's what I tell my clients all the time. I want you to get to the point where you are your own therapist. And the same with parents that I do advocacy for. I want you to get to the point where, you are doing your own advocating, because as we know, going into those IEP meetings, it's you as the parent, and then there's everybody from the school staff you know, around there, it can be very intimidating. And it's surprising to me how many parents don't read through the whole entire IEP document. They don't know what's in there. They don't know what goals the school should be working on, the teachers and, the support staff. They don't know what services their child is getting and how the increments of those services is so much that they don't know, that they don't even know if the school is actually abiding by the IEP.
Exactly. And what's funny is that a couple times what I've had to do is when I read through, especially an IEP, because from my perspective, an IEP is for the parent. And so if I read through an IEP and as a professional, I'm questioning what certain things mean, or I have to look up the definition of something because it's a jargon word or, something that is specific to a field, I'll go into that meeting and I'll tell them, you need to write this in a way that the parent can understand this. They should not have to, again, like you said, with going into the meetings, and even when it comes to reading the IEP, a parent should be able to read through an IEP and it should basically be in layman's terms. They should be able to go through it and understand it. But oftentimes I almost feel like they are written that way on purpose to confuse the parents. And I can imagine, I tell people all the time, in my early years of my son's IEP, I didn't read through the whole thing. I did what every other parent does, which I see all the time, is you go into the meeting, they slide you a copy, and they tell you what's written in it. And you say, oh, okay, that sounds good. Yeah. Oh, okay, that's about right. And so you have no idea what it says, but you just know that what they're telling you it says sounds good.
Yes, my daughter's first IEP meeting, I attended by phone, and I was like, nobody told me that I really needed to be in person and be there, and I make sure to tell parents now, prior to this pandemic, that, if it's in person, you need to be there. You need to show your face, you need to make sure you're there reading what's going on, because more often than not, in most cases, 99.9%, they've already met prior to your IEP meeting. They've already gone over what they're going to talk about. And of course, the draft is already done, which is why you should be requesting it prior to your meeting. But they've already had the conversation. They've already had a meeting.
That was exactly my next point.
Prior to you getting there. So you need to make sure that, you're getting the documents beforehand, because, they've already made the point of what they're going to talk about. And it's up to you to be like, no, this isn't right. This isn't right. I would want more of this and, less of this, whatever is tailored to meet your child's specific need.
Yes, and that preparation is so important, right? Because, and that's what I taught, same thing, Maria. I tell my parents ahead of time, get the document so that you can take your time and review it and highlight and put question marks and little notes, so that going into the meeting, you're not being talked at. It's a meeting, it's a conversation happening, and so that you're an active participant in that meeting and not just being talked at. That happens way too often. The parent is supposed to have input. How can you truly have input on something in the moment? People, there's times where parents are told, oh, we only have 45 minutes. Oh, we only have an hour. And, oh, such and such has to go back to class. And this person has to go back. They don't have coverage. So we have to rush things along. And then the parents feel, pressured into just saying, oh, okay, it sounds good, versus who's going to sit there and truly take the time during the meeting to read it word for word. I've seen IEPs that are 45 pages long. Yes. Parents aren't going to feel comfortable reading it word for word during that meeting time. So we have to encourage them to get those documents ahead of time.
Yes. And shifting gears to talk about us now being in this pandemic, what should parents be doing now to make sure their child's IEP is just right?
Ooh, So the more time has gone along, the best advice that I could possibly give parents right now is to make sure that you're observing your child in this current state, and that you're both being honest with yourself and your team about what your child is capable of and what needs to pick back up once we go back brick and mortar or what have you. We have to be honest with ourselves first and foremost. I see a lot of parents saying, you know, my kid can't sit in front of a computer for X amount of hours. They're not paying attention. They're not getting anything out of it. And I 100% understand that, especially when you have kids that are kindergarten or first grade, especially when you have children that have high levels of ADHD or are, you know, on a high level of spectrum for autism. Those children are not gathering but so much information trying to sit in front of a computer. So we have to first start there. What do you know? If you feel like, okay, they can handle 15 minutes 3 times a week, you need to articulate that to the team. If it's for occupational therapy, speech therapy, because like occupational therapy and speech therapy services can still be provided, but it also means that at that point, the parent is taking on a lot of that onus, right? When it comes to those services actually being enacted. And so again, no pressure. If you know that you are not capable, do not put that on yourself. But we have to come to the conclusion that going forward, until if you feel like they can't do it virtually, you need to say, okay, my child is not going to get anything out of this, and have it documented that the expectation is that services are on pause due to the pandemic, and this is temporary until we go back to the brick and mortar setting. And what I found is some schools are actively not sending new NOREPs and or any type of addendums or anything to the IEPs. I actually had a school, when I was on a call for an IEP meeting, try to say, oh, well, we don't need to do a new NOREP. That's only for the placement itself. Or, well, we just know. And I said, no. I said, the one thing that I know is that because of the type of work that I do research. And just the day before that meeting, I made sure that I went on the Department of Education's website, and it specified that schools should be noting in writing and amending the IEP to specify that due to a temporary order, due to the pandemic, this is what we are providing, and this is how these services will be rendered until XYZ. And so that's my advice to all parents is, no matter what circumstances you're in, however you decide that this is going to move best for you and your child, get it in writing.
Yes, and for those of us who are not in Philly, the NOREP is actually the PWN, which is the prior written notice. No problem. So it's the prior written notices that you're getting, and some schools are sending them in mail and saying that they're not responsible for FAPE, which is just ridiculous.
Right, it's not true.
So you have to make sure that even if you get one of those notices, and you're saying, I'm not going to sign it, but know that some states, non-signature is an agreement. So you will still have to make sure that you know your state's laws, and that if you're getting these NOREPs or PWNs, that you are notating on them what you're agreeing to, what you're not agreeing to, and that you sign it and make a copy, so that you are keeping your paper trail. So speaking of our new normal, what should parents be doing for ourselves during this time?
One of the major things that I want parents to do for themselves is provide themselves with grace. So whether it's a matter of what time the kids are getting up, because again, once they're up, right, we're all up. get your cup of coffee, relax. If you have to work, get on for an hour or two before they wake up, and do things in a relaxed mode. Give yourselves grace in every sense of the word and take time out for you. As parents, we put so much pressure on ourselves in all aspects of life, right? We want to be the very best parents. We want to do a great job at our job. We want to be the best spouse that we can be. All these different aspects. And when we're talking about this new norm and the pandemic and all of this, we have to look at it as just that, a new norm. What can you do for you? What are you learning? What are you teaching yourself? Are you enacting more family time? Are you guys, relaxing and playing games, watching movies? Do whatever it is that feels good to you. I keep looking at like my face mask that I have upstairs in my room. I'm like, I'm gonna find a day where I can completely just lay in a bed and put my face mask on. It's just the little things, that we have to do for ourselves. Me getting up every morning. One of the things that I've been doing for myself is I tell the kids, all right, I'm going downstairs to work out. Give me a few minutes. I'll let y'all know when I'm done. Then we can, everybody can start moving again. But that's something that I've wanted to do for myself, right, over the past year. Mm-hmm. But my new norm has allowed me to really fit it in now. I make sure that I get my morning workout in. So make sure that you figure out what it is that'll give you peace, that'll make you happy, and add that into your schedule.
Yes, I love that. I know it's so important, like you said, to give ourselves grace. One thing that I had to give myself grace was with the distance learning, because like a lot of you out there, I have more than one child that I'm providing distance learning for. And then if they're all going to the same school or even not going to the same school and various grades, there's different times you have to be on the computer to meet. And then with those children who have disabilities or younger children, you have to make sure you're right there with them at the computer. So it's a lot of stress on us as well. And one thing I did have to do was communicate with the school what is realistic for me as a parent that has multiple children, multiple children who have disabilities. I was like, there are certain things that I'm not going to be able to do. One, because there's 3 meetings going on at the same time and I can't attend all 3 meetings at the same time. It took me advocating for myself in that instance with the school and being realistic about what I can do, like you said, being truthful, not only with our children, but what we're capable of. So I had to do that with the schools and say, I can't do this, but I can do this. That way I don't want it to interfere with my children's learning, as well as not wanting it to interfere with their grades and them being able to advance to the next grade level for next academic school year. So we have to give ourselves that grace and be honest, because that pressure with this distance learning is so real. And it's like, oh my gosh, I'm failing.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm glad that you even brought that part up, because that's another piece, right? So a lot of times, like you said, with the distance learning, we always think about the show, right? Are you smarter than a 5th grader? And it's like, no, not when it comes to 5th grade work. I am not. We're so far removed from that. And so I just, again, do what you can and speak up about the rest. Like, that's the best, to me, I feel like that's the very best advice I could possibly give any parent that has a child that is, new to this distance learning and dealing with this pandemic. Do what you can do and leave the rest. Mm-hmm. But you have to communicate that. If you say, you know what, I tried to get through this assignment, I did the best that I could, we worked through the work, but you know what, we're missing a few assignments. I don't think we're going to get through with the rest of them. So what can we do about this? Articulate that to the school, because 9 times out of 10, the teacher's going to say, you know what? Listen, don't worry about that. I can tell from these assignments that you did do that they understand it, they're doing their work. Don't worry about the other stuff. But when we continue to maintain that pressure on ourselves and we're not communicating with our teachers, you're adding undue stress.
Yeah.
It's undue stress. You don't have to be that stressed about it if you're communicating.
And like we said, advocating for yourself and your children, because we don't want what we can't do to impact what they need to do for school. So if we're communicating and saying, this is what I can do and this is what I can do, we've let them know, and then we can adjust accordingly, because this is a new thing for all of us, this crisis schooling, this homeschooling. It's new for the schools and it's new for us. So we're all still trying to figure it out. So that grace is so important in this aspect. So I wanted to ask, do you have any resources for parents to help them with advocating, to help them with IEPs and, dealing with this new normal? Any resources that you have for parents?
I'll give a few that would actually work for all parents across the board, right? Excuse me, that a lot of people wouldn't think of. Back to what I said that I had to reference, right? The Board of Education website. Lots of information from the top down. A lot of people don't realize that when it comes to special education and education in general, many of the laws are federal. So it's not about state to state, school to school, district to district. I've seen, parents say things like, oh, well, my school does it this way. And what they're pertaining to, I said, I'm sorry to tell you, but that's a federal law that they're breaking.
Exactly.
They don't get to make that choice. So go to that website and do a little research, a little reading. The other place is your school handbook. My very, very first case that I worked on my own, I got all of my ammunition from the school's own handbook. Once I went through the handbook, everything that I needed to rebut was right there in the handbook. I didn't have to make anything up. I didn't have to do research. All I had to do was read their handbook and say, well, according to your handbook, it says. According to your handbook, it says. So what I want to tell parents is that a lot of what you need, a lot of the ammunition to support yourself and advocate for your child is right there at your fingertips. Do a little research, do a little reading, and you can advocate for your child, because anything that someone says we can't do, always question with, show me where it says that. Always. Because anything that anybody in this realm when it comes to education says can't be done or has to be done this way or it's the law, can you please point me in a direction of where it says that so I can read it for myself? So those two places are like number one. Your district's website as well. So Department of Education, your district website, and your school handbook has all the information pertaining specifically, because that's the other thing. A lot of times people will ask information from other people. So just like you had to say, prior written notice and not NOREP, right? Because everybody has like different jargon and different districts and different areas. So at least you know that if you're going from federal to district to school, you're getting the information that you need. If you're only advocating for yourself and your child, that's all the information you really need. You don't need the general information that those of us who are advocating for everyone else would need.
Yes, that is a great point, especially about, asking for the policies. A lot of times, like you said, it's the culture the school has created. It's nothing to do with the law. It's what they have created. And since they haven't been called out on it, they continue with it. So make sure you're asking for it in writing, because a lot of times once you say in writing, then they get to, oh, okay, this is not an actual policy. This is just what we do here. Yeah, and
that is
this is something that I'm personally going through right now with my own child. And I'm like, no, I need the policy on that. And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, it's no policy. Yeah, I know it's no policy. That's why I asked for it.
And that's the thing. Sometimes the person that's saying it, because again, we have some like teachers and like counselors that are fairly new, right? And so even if they've been there, say for a year or two, they've been to a couple IEP meetings, they're following suit.
Mm-hmm.
So they're assuming that it has to be law, it has to be, procedure and policy if this is what we've been doing. Mm-hmm. And so that's why when you ask for that documentation, everybody starts looking around like, you got documentation? Does it say that on there? Everybody's questioning experts, and I don't know. Let me see if we can find that. No,
because I don't know where that policy is. Yeah, it's not a policy. You made it up. You made it up. But they depend on parents not to question them, not to ask, well, where is it? And that's why they continue with it. But once you start advocating, like, no, I don't think that's correct, and showing that you are aware of the actual laws and guidelines and policies, then they have to actually step up to the plate.
And you know what? That is so important, right? If you can provide it as the parent, then you then have a leg up. Mm-hmm. So that's what I've realized. And I, again, to soothe my parents, I say to them all the time, my parents will say, well, I said this and I said that. You're not saying anything that I didn't say. And I said, the only difference between you and I is that they understand that my job is to know the law. Mm-hmm. They assume that as a parent, you're strictly working off of emotion. You're strictly working off of what you think should happen versus knowing what the law is. So if as a parent, you go in there and you can start slapping down some law, they'll start to look at you much differently. Your meetings will go very different moving forward if they understand that you're doing your research and you understand how the law works in your favor.
Yes. And even still, sometimes, you need an advocate. And I always recommend for parents to get an advocate. I myself have an advocate, and this is the work that I have an advocate because I want to stay in the role of parent, and I want my advocate to stay in the role of let's get this done and make sure we're doing what we need to do for your child. So I think, it's always good to make sure you're getting an advocate like Naomi or myself, to make sure that you're able to stay in the role of parent and be able to feel those feelings and not have to also think about policies and guidelines and things like that.
Yes, I specifically say that be the emotional person. That's literally the words that I use. I said, I need to be the emotional parent now, and I need someone else to be the professional advocate, because there's no matter what, when it's your child, you are emotionally driven. Yes. And so the most educated parent, the parent that I have one parent who has gone to the federal level on her own. However, when she has hired me to go into these meetings with her and we have a conversation afterwards, she's like, oh, I didn't even catch that. Oh, I didn't even hear them say that. And I said, because when they say certain things, you're triggered at that moment. I'm not emotionally driven, so I'm not triggered by anything that they're saying. I'm taking notes and I'm listening very carefully. And so that's what makes the difference of having that advocate in the room with you. They're not driven by emotion. It's straight business and documenting and making sure that you have all the information.
That is so true, because I know I am driven by emotion just in general. And then having our lawyer be in the process with us has been, so amazing, because, I get to sit in that emotion, and a lot of times I'm like, I know they're really trying it. And then a lot of times I'm like, I know I told them that, but they're not listening to me. They're going to listen to the lawyer. I said the same thing, so a lot of times having that advocate gets those results, because they're like, okay, they brought somebody in. It's not just because, regardless of me being a therapist and a special education advocate, a parent advocate, they still look at me as the parent. But when I bring in that person, they're like, okay, it's business time.
Yes, yes, yes. I'm telling you, I just did the same thing. I'm sending her my son's information like now because I'm like, enough is enough. This lady is just not listening. And I feel myself totally like all the professionalism is just eating out of me. So I'm like, I need that person to be that level head. And we have to understand, right, where our limits are. And, you know, I want parents to get that part. You seeking out help does not make you less than, does not make you weak, does not make you a bad parent. We all have our areas of profession.
Yes.
All together, right? So to feel like, you know, oh, if I have to get this advocate, then, you know, I'm not as good of a parent because I don't know how to do this for my child. Okay, we all love our cars, but that doesn't mean that we know how to fix them and do everything we need to do to make them run. Exactly. There's different things. Everybody has their role. And you have to allow the professional, because that's where their focus is, you have to allow that professional to work for you, make things happen, and take some of that pressure off you. It's a lot of pressure to get what you need for your child in this education system. So much pressure, so much frustration, so many walls that you hit over and over again and still have to then try to climb. It is frustrating. And so it's great to have a partner there with you when you're going through this fight.
Yes, that is great advice. And I thank you so much for it. So can you tell our listeners as we begin to wrap up where they can find you to seek out your services, to see what your business does? Where can they find you?
Yes, I'm on all of them. You can find me. I have a website, is www.advocacyunlimited.net. I'm also on Facebook. You can find Advocacy PA, Advocacy Unlimited PA. Sorry about that. Also Instagram, Advocacy Unlimited. And just to let everybody know, I do lives every Wednesday because, again, with this pandemic, just again having those moments of openness and reality checks of what's going on, speaking our minds, how we feel, and how we're all working through this together. So I'm doing that, and I'm soon releasing a course. So there's much to come from Advocacy Unlimited over the next few months.
Thank you. And we'll have all of that in the show notes. So thank you for, dropping all these gems and telling us about advocacy and what we need to be doing. We greatly appreciate it. And thank you all for listening. And we will catch you on the next episode of the Autism in Black podcast. If you haven't done so, make sure to subscribe to our podcast so you can always be notified when a new episode drops. To get the resources shared on today's podcast and the show notes, make sure to go to autisminblack.org/podcast. And be sure to share your takeaways from the show on IG Stories and Twitter using our official hashtag AIBPod so that we can find them and share them. And if you want to continue the conversation from today's episode, make sure to join our Autism in Black podcast Facebook community. And please make sure to answer the questions to gain entry. Thank you for listening and joining me this week. Have a good one.